Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
The Prime Minister's offer to opposition parties to work with the government on major issues has been rebuffed by Labour, who said her party had completely run out of ideas. The strategy is being seen as an attempt by Theresa May to reassert her authority since losing her parliamentary majority in last month's election. But tonight she's having to deal with a new problem brought about by one of her own MPs, who, in the last few minutes, has been suspended from the party after making a racist comment. Here's our political editor, Laura Kunsberg.
Monday morning at the market. Not any old shoppers.
Hey, how are you?
But the Prime Minister and her Australian counterpart, here to meet people caught up in the terror attack. But Prime Minister Turnbull happens to be an old friend of Theresa May. She doesn't seem to have many in politics these days.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Thank you, Malcolm, for visiting us today and for the excellent discussions we've had. It's always a pleasure to welcome our Australian friends to London, and even more so when we've just beaten them at the cricket.
With fears about her authority in her own party, she's making an appeal for others to work with her.
You want the opposition to contribute as well as to criticise, you're expected to say tomorrow. What do you say to your own critics, though, including in your own party, who say it's you that needs to change?
The government has got an ambitious agenda. It's an ambitious agenda which is there to address the big challenges that the country faces. Of course, one of those is getting the Brexit negotiations right, but there are other challenges that we face as a country too. And I think the public will rightly want us to get the broadest possible consensus in looking at those issues.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Her offer was mocked by the Labour leader.
The government is apparently now asking other parties for their policy ideas. And so, if the Prime Minister would like it, I'm very happy to furnish her with a copy of our election manifesto.
A difficult afternoon got worse.
Anne-Marie Morris is duly elected.
While she was on her feet, a recording emerged of the Tory MP Anne-Marie Morris talking at a private event about Brexit using offensive language.
And then we get to the real part, which is, in 2 years, what happened? There is no deal.
She said the phrase was unintentional and has apologised unreservedly if offence was caused. But the comments emerging on the day the Prime Minister called for an end to abuse meant MPs were quick to seize on it.
Does she agree that where that happens, organisations should take decisive and swift action?
Offensive behaviour by backbenchers is one thing. Asking the opposition for help is another. But with no majority to call her own, the Prime Minister can barely afford for anything to go wrong. With her authority cracked, there are no easy days for this Prime Minister. And in the last 15 minutes, Theresa May has now suspended that MP, Anne-Marie Morris, condemning her remarks. What's not clear is for how long she is going to be out of the Tory party. And while there may be calls for her to quit altogether, to stand down, in this febrile political atmosphere at the moment, the Conservatives would be very, very nervous of any by-election. Even by suspending her for some time, it means Theresa May's narrow current advantage in the Commons has slipped down by one. And this is an era when every vote will matter.
Laura, thank you.
Well, the problems keep on coming for Theresa May. Tonight, one of her MPs has been suspended from the Conservative Party after using a racial slur. Anne-Marie Morris made the comments during a talk about Brexit with senior Tory colleagues. Well, our political editor, Robert Peston, is in Westminster. Robert, can you first explain to us exactly what happened?
Well, Anne-Marie Morris, a Tory MP, was talking about the implications of Theresa May not getting a Brexit deal, and she used a very old-fashioned phrase that extraordinarily used that appalling N-word, and I think we can hear her just now.
And then we get to the real part, which is, in 2 years, what happened? There is no deal.
Robert, exactly how damaging is this then?
Pretty damaging for the Prime Minister for two reasons. One is, as you know, in that general election she just thought she lost her overall majority, and she's only gripping onto power thanks to the support of 10 DUP MPs from Northern Ireland, and clearly having suspended the Anne-Marie Morris from the parliamentary party. In theory, her tiny majority is even tinier tonight. But I think actually the real damage is something different. She's trying to embarrass Labour because of the evidence that some left-wingers are using abusive language online against MPs from all parties. The fact that a Tory MP has used such appalling language, well, that's the kind of publicity that this weakened Prime Minister can ill afford at the moment.
OK, Robert, thank you very much.
Now, the Tories are calling it grown-up politics, but Theresa May's appeal to opposition parties to work with her on matters of national importance has not gone down well. Jeremy Corbyn said the government had run out of steam and ideas, but there is some cooperation going on in Westminster with the launch of a cross-party group of MPs opposed to a hard Brexit. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has this.
Australia's Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull knew Theresa May at university. It turns out they share even more in common. Both tried earlier elections than they needed to, using very similar slogans. Both got pushed back by the voters. Today, Theresa May's latest response to her electoral setback, to ask the opposition to come forward with policy ideas and work with her.
This government has an ambitious agenda to change this country. And there are many issues. There are many issues on which I would hope that we will be able to achieve consensus across this House.
The government is apparently now asking other parties for their policy ideas. And so, if the Prime Minister would like it, I'm very happy to furnish her with a copy of our election manifesto. Or better still, an early election in order that the people of this country can decide.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Behind the scenes, there are government efforts to see whether the Labour leadership will back Brexit legislation putting EU laws into British law, so there's no legal void when Brexit happens. But one new cross-party grouping thinks the elections created an opportunity to unpick Theresa May's plan for Brexit, which they think is too drastic.
I want, and Chuckers, I think, believes is the same. We want everything to go back on the table, put it back on the single market. All options.
But you're a minority in your parliamentary party, and you've just been wrapped over the knuckles for trying to pursue the sort of agenda you're talking about by your party leader.
But we're not talking about this.
They haven't moved that much, have they?
We're not talking. This is about out there. Yeah. Real world.
It's not about Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn or our parties.
Theresa May visited Borough Market with the Australian Prime Minister. 2 Australian women were amongst the 8 killed here last month. Earlier, Mrs May dismissed the idea of asking Jeremy Corbyn for cross-party support on counter-terrorism measures, even though it had been announced that was one of the areas where consensus would be sought. The perils of trying out new tactics and lines in a very fluid political environment.
Well, there's been another scandal in Westminster today after a Conservative MP used the N-word in a speech about Brexit this lunchtime. Amid an outcry, she's now had the whip withdrawn. Gary Gibbon joins me now with more. Gary, what is the latest on this story?
Well, after hearing that Anne-Marie Morris MP had used this word associated with the age of slavery in the United States, Theresa May said she was shocked. She ordered the Chief Whip to suspend Anne-Marie Morris from the party whip. Chief Whip had a conversation directly with Anne-Marie Morris, and she no longer holds the whip. This comes at a period when MPs have been talking an awful lot about how voters have been insulting them. There's a debate later this week in Parliament about that, and an awful lot of Tory MPs have been saying a lot of the dynamic for this have been coming from online supporters of Jeremy Corbyn. Well, here's a Tory MP using insulting language, and so that confuses that particular debate a little. People will be wondering what it means for the government's majority. I think the Chief Whip will have been very careful in telling this MP that there is a way back, handled the whole situation with care, and that will make sure, I suspect, that this particular MP stays voting for the government, maybe even conspicuously, until they've earned their passage back.
Indeed. Gary, thank you very much.